Hello everyone, I am Shalini Dabholkar, COO of India SME Accelerator Network. And I take this opportunity to welcome all of you to an exclusive interview on celebrating entrepreneurship. As a business accelerator for MSMEs, our endeavors have been towards providing micro level support to micro, small, medium enterprises. And our flagship program, Accelerator Program, helps businesses with a time bound professional engagement and support required to grow. On the other hand, our online platform handholds businesses on their long journey of growth by showcasing them business opportunities, access to industry experts, giving them business resources, tools, networking with fellow MSMEs, and so on. So, we have been continuing our efforts to support businesses in good and bad times. Today, we celebrate the World MSME Day to commemorate the power of small. This interview is yet another initiative from our side to help small businesses dream big and hear it from successful entrepreneurs on how they made it big. In the 1970s, when couples were stigmatized by the inability to conceive naturally, and women were ostracized for their inability to bear children, Dr. Ajay Murudia challenged the notion by bringing in to the fore the subject of male infertility beyond female infertility. Today, Indira IVF is India's and the world's largest IVF specialty clinics chain. With 94 centers across the country, supported by a passionate workforce of over 2,200 people, the organization is helping thousands of desirous families to deal with the issue of infertility. We have with us today none other than Dr. Kshitij Murudia, the Chief Executive Officer of Indira IVF. In 2010, Dr. Kshitij Murudia was one of the youngest doctors to perform IVF procedure in the country. Today, he's a gynecologist with over a decade of experience in carrying out successful IVF procedures in India. And he has led Indira IVF to become one of the largest fertility chains in India that charts a clinical success rate of 74%, that is best in class as per international standards. Since the inception of Indira IVF, Dr. Murudia has been at the helm of operations to provide assured customer satisfaction and drive and company's vision of providing primary and ancillary infertility related services to the low and medium income families. With this, I wish a very warm welcome to Dr. Murudia to our interview today.
Thank you so much for the introduction. Pleasure to be here.
Great. So, Dr. Murudia, my first question to you is, this is such an intense subject and you have championed the cause in a wonderful way, way long ago. So could you please introduce a little bit about what the company is doing today and what are the kind of scale of operations that you're dealing with currently?
Sure. So we are in a very niche or specialty healthcare business, which is called IVF, and we cater to people who could not have normal pregnancy or childbirth because of any reasons in the male factor or female factor. And as you rightly said, we focus on the couple as a whole. I mean, being a society in India, the entire brunt of the childlessness was to be born on females in the past, but we brought in the concept, and my dad, Dr. Ajay Murudia, brought this in back in 1980s when nobody used to think that males also could be responsible. And then we brought this concept that a couple should be tested as a whole. I mean, there could be problems in the male, there could be problems in the female, doesn't matter, there could be problems in both. So both the partners should be tested and treated. So we are into a healthcare niche, I would say IVF sector, which would help couples to have their child through some other means than the natural way. We are spread across the country with 94 centers with a hub and spoke model in order to increase the accessibility and affordability both, because IVF would require multiple visits and multiple days of treatment. So people should not leave their work off from office and then travel to some other city. And that's why we thought we'll just come up with great accessibility to people and spread across the country. We have a workforce of 2,000 plus passionate people, who are bringing smiles to these couples. Roughly around 125 embryologists who are the specialists in working with the eggs and sperms of the patient and help them develop the embryos and create beautiful babies out of it. I would say 200 plus doctors in the whole group who are specialized for these IVF procedures. And then basically hub and spoke model, because we wanted to reach to the tier 2, tier 3 towns as well. You can't go with the entire setup to all the cities or all the towns and villages in the country. So we are constantly searching for different models as to how do we increase the accessibility and reach out to more and more people who are having this problem and educate them, bring awareness among them that this is a medical problem and you have scientific solutions to all these problems. You don't resort to the traditional ways of treating, because when we started, we felt there's a lot of awareness issues are there with the couple. They think if they are infertile, there's some kind of a, I would not use the word black magic, but there's some kind of something wrong that is going on, and people would resort to unscientific technologies or things like, jad funks and going to babas and tantrics, and people used to come and tell us there's this neem ka ped or people ka ped, and you just take 25 rounds and tie a knot there, and then within a month or two you'll be pregnant and all those things. So I think that was one of the biggest challenges that we thought we would address right away and bring awareness among all these people so that they can understand what they are going through, why there is a problem, and what is the medical and scientific solution to it. We primarily operate as a B2C model, as opposed to, what people think a healthcare system would be, a B2B model where you are tying up with various gynecologists or other doctors and they send patients to you as a referral and all those things. We are a direct to consumer brand. We don't have a star doctor, so we are not doctor driven in the sense that, such and such doctor or Dr. Kshitij or Dr. Ajay, you won't find my name or my dad's name anywhere in the hospital or anywhere published in the advertisements or marketing material. So it's Indira IVF as a brand which is being promoted as the first, and the trust is built around the brand that if you come to Indira IVF, no matter who's the doctor treating you, there will be standard protocols, there will be standard guidelines against which you will be evaluated. There are standard treatment protocols, and everybody, even the doctors, the front office, the nursing, the embryologist, everybody has to follow those standard protocols, and that's where we can guarantee you good success. So it doesn't matter in our setup. Doesn't matter if my doctor is 10 years old or 10 years of experience, I would say, or he or she is having a 5 year of experience or 1 year of experience. We make sure through our protocols and training processes that everybody who's in the system, 1 year experience or 10 year experience, they would deliver the same treatment outcomes to the patient, which is, which is kind of unheard, or I would say contrary to your thinking in a healthcare business, because people start believing that the older the doctor is, the more experienced he or she would be, and people used to prefer going to a experienced or an older doctor. So we've got in our mind, because me and my brother along with my dad, we started the whole idea of this IVF and healthcare delivery. And he comes from an engineering background. He's from IIT Kharagpur, and he used to work in a French oil company with all those checklists. Every procedure will have 10 checklists, and then so he wired all those thought processes in my initial days of treatment of IVF. That if you're doing a procedure, why can't you have a checklist of 10-15 things that you would do in this procedure, starting from preparing a patient to doing the surgery to post-surgery and everything. And I think that changed the whole concept in our mind, that healthcare is not something that should come with experience. It's not an art, it's a science, and it has steps, it has procedures. There's a defined way to evaluate a patient and treat a patient. And that's how we thought, changing from the entire B2B model or a star doctor practice to a B2C model, and brand being first, and protocols and SOPs and objectivity to be first rather than subjectivity in medical treatment. And that led us to start a training academy also, because there's always shortage of skilled manpower in the country. In any field, I'm not talking about healthcare or any other industry, any other stream you go, there's a shortage of skilled manpower. and we never wanted that shortage to become a bottleneck for our expansion. So we thought of creating our own skilled manpower, and that's where we brought this concept of Indira Fertility Academy, which is one of a world-class training institute that we've built up in Udaipur, having all the latest simulators and all advanced techniques of how you should train a doctor in fertility. So that's what we've done in the business.
Excellent. I think that's brilliant. I think a lot of important points came out from there. And the fact that you spoke about building the brand right from the beginning, rather than have the names of doctors, stand out, which is typical in healthcare. I think that's something that's very, very different from what normally businesses tend to do. Small businesses tend to do. So, but this would have been I would say something that evolved with time, or was it right from the beginning? Because before becoming the large business that you are now, you would have made a critical journey of starting as a micro business, so to say, and then moved into becoming small, and then a medium, and then the large, really large chain that you become. So could you tell us a little more about this specific journey in the interest of our MSME audience?
Sure.
Most of them who are currently micro, some are small, and some are medium.
Yeah. So obviously, I think that thought process, it was not planned. I mean, as you go through your journey, you face challenges, and you re-strategize, or you adapt to the new situations, and you recalibrate your strategy going forward.
Right.
And I think it came to our mind after, I would say, 2 to 3 years of starting the business, because things were growing, people were flowing from all parts of the countries. We just had one center in Udaipur for the initial 4 years before we started expanding out. So those 4 years, people were coming from all over the country. We were doing the largest number of cycles in the country as a single center that time in 2014. But then we realized, I was the doctor, my father is a doctor, and my brother, he did embryology courses, and then he was running the embryology lab. And we realized we were working from 6:30 in the morning till 12:30 in the night, and we could just do maybe 100 procedures in a month, or 150 procedures in a month. That was our capacity. And that that thought process over a month or two, we could realize that you could never scale up. There's a limit to me working in 24 hours a day. I can't work 26 hours a day, and then you are entirely drained up. So the moment you think you want to expand, you have to create people like you. And when I say people like you, means people who could be passionate, people who could be empathetic to the patients, because it's a healthcare service, people who could deliver the same outcomes, and people who are viewed by the patients as respectable doctors. That is very, very important, because patients would not go into the details of what procedures or surgeries or treatment that are you doing. They just correlate that doctor as somebody who's having adequate knowledge, good communication skills, good body language, how confident is that doctor, how other patients vouch about that doctor. So I think there were multiple challenges, not just of creating a skilled manpower who could deliver good outcomes, but also making sure that people or the patients or your customers, whatever way you say, in whichever business you are, they equally respect that person sitting side by side to you, or even in a position better than you. And that's where we thought, let's recruit people. And it's not just about recruiting people, it's about training them also to make sure that they deliver same outcomes. So I think 2013 onwards or 2014 onwards, we started recruiting doctors and embryologists, and started those early shoots of training. That time we didn't have a fancy setup of training and all those simulators and advanced machines that we use now. But we started training them, started making them through each and every SOPs, and that's where we formulated all our SOPs and steps and procedures. Whether you create a burger, or you create babies, or you create a finished technology product from your factory, doesn't matter. There are like 15 or 20 steps in everything that you do, and there has to be an SOP around each and every step, and that's what you do. We created SOPs, we created those steps, we trained people to master those steps one by one, and that's it. I mean, ultimately the finished product or the outcome has to be, equally good as whether I am doing or somebody else is doing. So I think that was the initial switch after 2-3 years of doing our business and being busy from early morning to late nights. We thought this is not the way that we can expand. I mean, until unless you create or clone yourself, I would say, you create people like you who can be so passionate. And that's where we started this journey of recruiting doctors, recruiting embryologists, training them, and making sure that you start stepping back. I mean, that's a very difficult situation. Uh, a month back, people would come and touch your feet. I mean, healthcare business, people feel so grateful, and especially in IVF, you've given them something which changes their life tremendously. I mean, people who don't have child or babies, and then you suddenly do something treatment, and then they have babies, their entire life changes, and people are so grateful to you. And then suddenly stepping back from that situation, not treating anyone, and after 6 months nobody recognizes you. I was moving around in the hospital, nobody would recognize me, who I am, and people would somewhere come and ask you who you are. So I think that was a tough part, being a doctor. That's very tough, and that's where we struggle. I think I've seen many doctors who've gone like now 50 plus and who have tremendous experience. That shock of stepping back and pushing the younger people forward and making them the face of the clinic or the hospital is the toughest part that a doctor would say. I mean, face in life, because ultimately, if you don't push 10 people ahead of you and tell everybody these 10 people are better than me in treating you, so get treated by these 10 people, don't worry about me. I mean, I am there to look everything at the back, but these 10 people would treat you. I think that's the switch that you need to take care of, and step back, so that you can start expanding, you can start focusing on the other important things. Because once you scale up, there are different kind of challenges that would come up, of standardizing quality, making sure everybody is working in the same pattern, make sure the outcomes are good. So there's a whole lot of management or challenges that come when you start expanding. So initial challenges are around medical part, the skill, the technology that you use in medicine, and awareness and all those things.
Right.
But after expansion, you have a whole different set of challenges that you have. So I think that switch happened in 2013, 2014, after 2-3 years of our starting the IVF part business. Okay. And 2014 is when we started our next center in Pune. And then 2018, we were at the 50th center, and 3 years now. I mean, I would not use the last 1 year because of COVID, nothing happened. But after the 50th center, in the next 2.5 years, we are almost close to a century of number of centers that we have, which is by far the largest in the country, and almost among the top few ones in the world that we have right now.
Wonderful. So true, some of the points that you raised, and you beautifully put them across to say that, how it's important for, entrepreneurs to step back at the right time and train people and put them forward with SOPs, ensuring quality, as you begin to scale up. Very, very, very important messages coming there. And I hope our MSMEs are taking notes from this, because all this is very, very crucial for you to actually apply back in your business. Doctor, one important aspect comes when you're trying to transition like this from micro to small, etc., which is around the chicken and egg, whether you put the money or you wait for scale and let scale give you more money. That's the cyclical, challenge that sometimes businesses face. So when it comes to the initial years, managing your finance and cash flow challenges, what has been your experience, and what is the advice you would like to give enterprises?
I think we had a very cautious approach right from the beginning. I can see there could be two extremes of being very cautious and very outrageous or very adventurous, I would say. But I would recommend being a little cautious on this side, and we never went overboard in terms of expansion, because the market is not ending in the next 2 years. It's an ever increasing demand, whether you're in FMCG or you're in healthcare. It's an ever increasing demand. The lifestyle that people have, I think infertility is going to increase year on year, which is not a good thing. I mean, people should focus on their reproductive health, on exercise, nutrition, diet. There's a trend of late marriages, late childbearing, focusing more on career, and that's adding to the stress of the family in terms of reproduction, which is not a good thing. So I think it's not a good thing to be very aggressive and very adventurous, because things are not ending in next 1 or 2 years that you should suddenly expand to 50 or 100 centers. What we did initially is we started getting the traction. We started earning from one center. The one center, the excess cash flows of one center earning would fund the second center, stabilize the second center. The two centers then would have excess cash flows that would fund the next two centers, and fourth, four centers would fund next four centers, and that's how we strategized. We never took a big funding or a loan in the initial years. That kept us very grounded and very, I would say, conservative in terms of how do you manage cash flows, and at the same time keep on expanding. But I would say yes. Once we realized the potential is there, the growth is there in the market, we never took back too much of money back home, or having huge salaries and taking out all excess cash and enjoying life. I think the initial years we just thought every extra penny that you have in the company should be invested for some expansion. Obviously you have some cash reserve for the bad days as COVID. We always kept a small kitty of money for any bad times, because we were fearing this. The moment you grow, your fixed expenses grow from 1 crore a month to 20 crores a month, say your rentals, your fixed salaries, your AMCs and other things are never going to go off. So always keep a fund which could help you survive at least 6 months of bad phases. And I'm talking about 2018, 2019, when we used to have sleepless nights, thinking that our fixed expenses have gone so high. Something happens to the business for next months, you should be able to survive and capitalize after that once you start being normal in that. And then there could be multiple challenges. COVID is just one example. There could be organizational challenges in some factories, unions and all. There could be policy changes that could happen and that could affect your business overnight from the government and agencies and other things. So I would recommend having a 6 months of budget in your place as per your fixed expenses that you have. Always try to curtail your fixed expenses. Don't go overboard on your fixed expenses. And we took a modest, say 20-25 crores of loan. That too, when we had good enough money, because India is a country where when you actually need a loan, nobody would give you a loan. So we tried taking a loan in 2015 or 16. All the banks denied that, you don't qualify for even 20-25 crores of loan. But a year later, they were running after us saying you qualify for 100 crore loan. And we said, we don't need money now. That's the funny part. When you need money, people will not come, and when you don't need money, they'll come in pouring with lots of money. And then we said, okay, we don't need money. So we just had maybe a year or two exposure of 20-25 crores of debt. But that's fine. I think you need to be very cautious in expansion. Don't be very conservative. Don't go overboard, and always keep a backup plan for 6 months of survival at least, so that COVID is a great example. Very many companies suffered. They had to retrench people. They could not pay salaries on time. So that time you should be standing with your people and at least have that comfort that I can survive for 6 months or 12 months. Nobody's gonna come back on you. We did some salary cuts last year. All the employees were very supportive and very forthcoming in supporting the company through that bad time, and everybody gracefully took it, and we normalized it back in September or October. And things are good. And last year was no increment. This year we gave 2 years of increment together, so everybody's happy. I think you keep your people happy and they'll keep you and the company happy. That's what I believe.
Great. Thank you very much for some very, very important points coming there on not being outrageous and adventurous when it comes to investing or taking risks in business. Also building some amount of a kitty for bad times, and yet scaling up with internal funding, as you rightly put, from one center to another, and wading through all kinds of times is excellent. Very, very important points coming from there. So as you grow and as you scale, I'm sure the number of customers you're dealing with today is humongous when it comes to the scale of operations. When you say 92 centers across the country, that's quite a scale of dealing with customers, one new customers plus existing customers. So how do you manage the customer connect and the customer delight in this kind of a growing space that you're in?
I think you've touched a very sensitive part of healthcare, which has been ignored from years and years. I remember when I was in medical school, I mean, doctors would just, talk to the patient that come to them. And, most of the times, some doctors are very busy that they don't even raise their head to you. I mean, you just keep saying something, they'll listen and they'll be busy writing, and then you're given a prescription and you go out and, talk to some assistant and they'll explain you the medicines and that's it. But I think what we did is, one, there should be no prior appointments. I mean, people should not wait, and take appointments. You're getting an appointment after 5 days or 7 days. You just walk in and we'll make sure that we make you meet a doctor. You'll be consulted, you will be investigated, treated, whatever way you want, you'll be done, and then you'll be through. Second important thing, we said we would not increase the waiting time. I mean, there are some places where you would just sit for 3 hours or 4 hours and then you get to meet a doctor for 2 minutes or 3 minutes. We said whosoever comes in, within half an hour, they should go and meet a doctor. And we could do that because of our difference in approach of no star doctor and a B2C brand. So people are not hooked on to one specialty, one special doctor. If you're coming to our center today, you might meet a Dr. A in the center. Tomorrow, your ultrasound will be done by Dr. B. Your surgery is done by Dr. C. Eventual final counseling is done by the fourth doctor. And patients are fine with that. I mean, initially I used to think, being a patient, you would want to stick with one doctor. You believe that, this doctor knows my entire history, my entire case and everything, and I would trust them. But we said, no, I mean, every doctor is same in terms of the knowledge. Every doctor is governed by SOP. So you keep meeting different doctor, doesn't matter. Everybody would see your file and would give you the same advice. You can meet 3 doctors in one day. So there's no consultation charges extra that we charge. Even if you come out from Dr. A and just wait for 10 minutes in the OPD area and want to consult Dr. B for the same problem, we don't say no to that. You can meet a number of times, all doctors, depending on their schedule, their availability. So that waiting time is reduced and the repeat consultation stigma is over. Otherwise, patients do fear कि आज इस डॉक्टर से मिल लिए हैं, वापस वही चीज उससे पूछेंगे तो he or she might get irritated and all those things. So I think that empathy, that behavior, that soft skill training is being imparted to all the doctors, the front office people, not to behave like a typical healthcare where because patients that are coming to you are already very stressed. Infertility is a very stressful situation because apart from being infertile, they have to face all that social stigma, the family issues. Everybody is running after you कि क्या हो गया, बच्चे क्यों नहीं हो रहे हैं, ये कर लो, वो कर लो. Everybody starts looking at you and starts pressurizing you. In India, I mean, if you don't have a baby after 3-4 years of marriage, it's a big issue in the family. And what's wrong? I mean, what's happening? So I think communication, counseling plays a very important role at that time where we engage. So we have a 1-hour counseling session every day in the morning with all the new patients. And then after the counseling session, you decide whether you want to meet a doctor or just go out of the clinic. You don't like, up to you. So I think that's very important to keep that connect with the patient. Now, the second leg of it is keeping connect when they go back from the consultation. Back home and they've started taking medicine, they'll follow up in the next 1 or 2 months. That time we built up a big call center. So now, I mean, initially we had 150 people in-house. Now we've done some outsourcing and some in-house call centers. So there are specialized people who are given all the medical training so that they support the patients, because there could be emergencies at the middle of the night. There could be emergencies during the treatment, and it's a very sensitive issue. Going to a doctor with pain abdomen and then they've given you medicine and sometimes you feel a mild pain again coming up, it's okay. But in our treatment, I mean, a slight bleeding or spotting or anything that would occur has a huge psychological impact on the patient, on the treatment, and stress levels go off the roof. I mean, suddenly something happens. That's why where we have dedicated call center helplines for each and every problem. We give a lot of handouts to our patients, for the common problems. Vomiting ho to kya karna hai, पेट में दर्द हो तो क्या करना है. So I think they are one very educated by the time they leave through the hospital by the end of the treatment, with all the handouts, with all the counseling sessions that they've done, and then they have the constant support 24 hours 24/7 for these specialized helpline numbers where they could reach out and ask their questions to these counselors. In case of grave emergencies, they can directly connect to the doctor, they can rush into the nearest hospital. And we followed a pattern that whether you've taken treatment from Delhi and you're from Lucknow, you go to any center with any patient, any file, any center, you are okay. I mean, as long as it is Indira IVF file, you can rush into any nearest center that you have. You don't have to follow at one particular center. I think that is there. And then third leg is, I think everybody is using now, especially the COVID and the pandemic times, you have to digitally engage with your people more and more. I feel the more you bring about awareness about the disease within them, the more informed and more, I think they can take more informed decisions about their disease pattern rather than, pushing that medical treatment onto them. I would not want to say that, you are suffering from this disease, so you need this treatment. We'll go by explaining what disease they have, why is it causing infertility, what is the medical and scientific treatment for it, and what are the various options that they could have. And then the doctor would participate with them in deciding the best course of action. Ultimately, the answer would be the same. I'm not saying the answer would be different, opposed to if I directly tell them, okay, you have this disease, this is the treatment, done. So, I mean, we take them through the entire journey of why this disease, how this disease is causing infertility, what are the options available, and how you should go about it. That helps them to understand everything and take informed decisions, I think. And then constantly communicating through various digital initiatives about, telling, how the disease is causing infertility, what are the options, any similar cases that we have done in the past. If they can find patients who are actually, because after the people conceive, they come also follow up with us for some treatment for the 6-7 months. So when the patients for infertility are getting treated, there are other patients who are getting their pregnancy scans also done, pregnancy treatment also. There are somebody's in the 3rd month or 6th month or 7th month of pregnancy. So we let them interact with these kind of patients, so that they can get to know about their experiences, what problems they had, how their treatment went ahead. And there could be a lot of knowledge sharing from these pregnant people to these new people. And then I think the last leg is you have these patient experience teams within the center who are not connected to the medical team, and they work as independent, and they're just collecting feedback and drawing the NPS scores, the detractors and other things, during the entire duration of treatment, and making sure that the patient experience is not of a I would say healthcare business, but of a hotel business. I would say the respect, the empathy, the courteousness, the feedback that you get when you go to a hotel, it should be the same experience that you should get in a healthcare, because hotel people are free and they're in a holiday mood. Here you're having stressed people coming to your hospital for treatment, so you should be much more empathetic to them and to solve their queries.
So true, because this whole space of customers who are with you are in a different emotional space, and therefore engaging with them in such multiple fashion, lovely methods and processes in place to take care of them right from the beginning till post, after they're done and gone back home, and staying connected with them. I think very beautifully laid out by you. Thanks for that. And you touched upon an important point here, which is being connected with them with the digital methods. And IT is beginning to play a larger role than it has ever in the past, with our businesses. So, in your business, how are you able to leverage IT to the optimum over these years? How has it helped you transform your business from what it was?
Right. I think IT would play a a big role in all the industries that you have, and the entire thrust is coming from a lot of these artificial intelligence software that are coming at the back end, which are replacing human judgment wherever it's needed. And healthcare is one sector where I think the human judgment score is the most. I mean, a doctor would think that, I have 10 years of experience, I've seen 1,000 patients like this, and this in my experience would work the best in this class of a patient, or this kind of a patient who's suffering from these many ailments or diseases or problems. And where, I mean, because of our mindset and philosophy of direct B2C branding, or no star doctor practice, or drawing up SOPs and protocols and making sure everybody sticks, and bringing in more objectivity rather than subjectivity. We've taken this vision forward and started working on our software, which is a hospital management software, when it in itself is a validation tool and also a support to the doctor. So the moment you start pushing in the patient data, okay, the female is 35, the male is 38, the sperm count is lower, the egg count is this, the ultrasound shows this problem, there's a fibroid, there's, sorry for the medical terms, I don't know, but the egg reserve shows this, the past history shows this. The moment you punch in the patient data, the basic 10-15 fields that we want from the investigation and the demographics and the history part of the patient, the system automatically runs the SOPs and flowcharts and comes out with a treatment plan or a care plan that, okay, this type of patient should actually fit into this kind of a treatment, these many medicines for these many months or days, and then they should follow up at this day, then you do this step, and then, keep going forward. So all our SOPs and flowcharts are coded at the back end, and they would assist the doctor during the treatment part, extensively, and not allow them to, I would not say not allow them, but yeah, in a sense, not allow them to deviate from our standard treatment protocols. Anytime they deviate, we would allow them, but then they have to put some remarks as to why they think that not this medicine and this medicine would be better, because our database shows this type of patient in the last 60,000 or 1 lakh patients that we have treated, this protocol has worked the best, so you should be using this protocol. So I think on this front that we are developing now, making our HIS, the hospital software, more and more robust with everyday data being pulled in to help assist our doctors to make informed decision in support of the patient care. I think one is that part. Second part, we've used IT in terms of our embryology lab as well. Now, embryology lab is something where embryologists would work with the human sperms and eggs and create these embryos. Embryos are being cultured in an incubator for 5 days, and then you see them under the microscope with your eyes and grade them, grade 1, 2, 3, or good grade or intermediate or poor grade. And that's where the subjectivity is still there, I would say. And there we are using these specialized AI softwares, which would take an image from the microscope, and the software would analyze basis similar kind of images in the past, which have shown good outcomes. And will again grade the embryos. Okay, this one should go first, second, third, fourth, 5, 6 numbers, because this has the maximum chances of pregnancy. So again, bringing in more objectivity, because if I give the same embryo to 10 different embryologists, they might have 2 or 3 different gradings of the same embryo, same image, because everybody has their own way of thinking and processing. But if I give that same embryo image 10 times to the software over a 1-year period, it will every time grade it in the same way. So that's where we can bring in a lot of, again, objectivity to the part that we're doing. So we are slowly evaluating and piloting these softwares and training these softwares, I would say, into more and more data, so that we can, reduce the number of embryos that we transfer, so that to reduce the twin pregnancies and all, and also bring in more precision into our decision making, that, out of these 4 or 5 embryos, which one is the best, which would give the outcomes to the patient. So I think second leg is on that side. And then we use a lot of witnessing technologies. Every medical procedure has to be done by a person and being witnessed by a second person. So there are 2 people involved in all the procedures, so that we have the quality audits going on. there we have replaced the second person and then put in the electronic witnessing system. So now all the patient samples are stick with an RFID chip. And RFID chips are similar to the chips that you have in your credit card, the golden small chip. So we use a nano version of that very small golden chip that is being pasted to every patient sample, be it a test tube or a petri dish or anything. And that would automatically, as you're working on your operative tables or desk, that would automatically check whether these two samples belong to the same couple, husband and wife, because IVF has a potential of mixing of gametes. If you're working with 2 or 3 patients at a time, there could be potential mix up. And I don't know whether you saw this movie Good News a few years back, where they showed mixing of gametes, and a whole lot of nightmare to the couple especially, and to the doctors and the clinics. So something of that sort should never happen in your clinic, and that's why we've used technology which could eliminate that kind of a risk. So now, all my working tables are fitted with this RFID readers and all those things. So the moment you bring in 2 different samples, even in the vicinity, forget about mixing, it would show up as an alarm. Everything gets logged. Senior has to come in, reopen the system, put in remarks as to what happened, why it happened, and then only you can work ahead. So I think that has come very handy technology for us, not just to prevent mixing, but we are getting a lot of data and analysis from these, because whenever you do a procedure, and I said it's every procedure is like 15-20 steps. So whenever a person is doing a procedure, the RFID detects what's going on, which procedure, which patient, who is the person, doctor or embryologist doing the procedure, and what time it is being done. We have standard SOPs that, okay, surgery started at 9 o'clock. This has to be done at 9:15, 9:30, 10, 10:15. So we get all the timings from these RFID readers, and then we analyze and plot it on a single page, center by center, 94 centers, how things are going on. Embryologist by embryologist, 125 people, whether they are doing this procedure in 10 minutes or 15 minutes or 45 minutes. That gives us a lot of insight to analyze where there could be potential problems, where there's a retraining need. Everybody's doing that procedure in 10 minutes, somebody's taking 40 minutes, call that person back to Udaipur, to the Fertility Academy, retrain them in these procedures, SOPs, why they're making mistakes. It's not about blame game, or it's about helping people, to achieve that level of excellence that we would want them to achieve. So I think technology, in every field, whether it's a doctor working in the clinic or seeing a patient or evaluating the ultrasound images or other things, we are using a lot of technology in that and helping the doctors take informed decisions, whether it's the embryologist working in the lab, or whether it is creating the skilled manpower from a basic pool of doctors. So, you will be surprised to know our average age of a doctor is 32 or 33. The youngest that we would have is 28 years of age, who's doing IVF procedures with us, which when I started doing IVF procedures, nobody was there 45 or less than 45 or 50, and they would try and keep it as a secret sauce so that nobody should, learn the technique or become a competition to them. Then when I started, I realized if you don't teach people, if you don't create that skilled pool, you will never be able to grow. You are just sitting with that one shop and you're limited to that. You have 24 hours, you can see 10 patients in a day, and that's it. You can't expand beyond it. So I think that young people, so we changed our thought process from finding doctors who are experienced, who are old, who have a knowledge of IVF. We thought, let's eliminate that. Let's bring in the young people who have just graduated or post-graduated and just OBGYN. So if 2 people apply at the age of 28 and 40, one person says I'm 12 years experience, one person says I'm 12 hours experience. I've just finished my graduation, post-graduation. I just have a degree and nothing else. We would prefer the 28-year-old person who's just graduated. And the reason is they are blank. It's whatever files that you put in their brain is what is going to stay there. I don't want a baggage to be coming with that old person. They have fixed ideas, they have fixed ways of thinking. They have 12 years of experience, so they have done all these procedures, and they think that this is good and I'll not change, and this has given me results, which is absolutely fine. I'm not saying that I'm against your theory. But healthcare is something which is very rapidly evolving, like an iPhone. I mean, every year you would have a different model. Every year you will have a different medicine, different technique that's coming in. And young people, I see, are more receptive, more adaptive to the changes. And it's, I feel like it's a blank new hard disk that is given to you. You keep inserting whatever you want files, keep deleting files whenever you want, and keep inserting new files whenever you want. And they work in a very structured, enthusiastic, and very passionate way compared to a older doctor. And that's why we created this academy to recruit young people, to train these young people. We got these simulators, which is again where we have leveraged IT in a big way. And if you've seen these flight trainings, I mean, everybody who wants to become a pilot has to do this virtual flight where you are sitting in a flight, but it's not in the sky, it's just in a room and it's moving here and there. And that's how we've imported these surgical I would say machines, where it's a machine, it's a computer in front of you, a big screen, a small mannequin is placed, and you start doing all these surgeries with all the instruments, scissors. You start doing ultrasounds, you start doing pickup surgeries, hysteroscopy, whatever a doctor would need for being an IVF specialist. We have the entire setup in the training academy on a virtual basis. So it would have like 200, 400 cases at the back end. You can take any surgery n number of times. Every time you take a surgery or a procedure, it'll grade you automatically on the various steps that you've done. What was the comfort of the patient, how much time you took, whether you took out the pathology completely or you left something inside. And keep grading you. After the end of the surgery, it'll tell you 15 steps, 5 steps you did excellent, 10 steps you failed. So you can take the surgery back again and make sure those 10 steps also you've done correctly. And then, earlier I was training people in the actual setup where they would be observing patients being treated by me or by other doctor, and then they would start learning and absorbing and then assisting and then becoming the main surgeon. Now we've moved to a virtual method. We say you struggle with the machines, the computers for a month. They would grade you. They would tell you, okay, you are 80% pass. You can take a test in the machine. The machine, if says, okay, you are pass, then you are allowed to come to the actual clinic and start observing and start assisting. So, when you're touching a patient, it's not your first patient, it's your 101st patient that you're operating, because 100 times you've already done that surgery on a machine. So I think that gave us a big leap in terms of, training and creating that skilled manpower pool, because that was our biggest bottleneck. When you think of expansion, you don't have so many doctors. I can't open suddenly, infra, I can put up 100 centers in a month. Money you can pull in, but you can't have 100 doctors in a month being ready to take care of those hospitals. So that's where, suddenly our capacity went up from say 2 doctors being trained in a month to 20, 25 doctors being able to train in a month. So that gave us a big leap in terms of the IT transformation that we had. So I think just to sum it up, one is on the doctor's side, helping them to assist with the treatment, and forget about that healthcare is a experienced doctor's game. Anybody new can come in with a software and just be happy with it. Second, also on the lab side, where we analyzing these embryo images and developing a protocol where which embryo is best. And third is on the training, that I would say, apart from your routine softwares or ITs like your CRMs, your ERPs, your HRMS softwares, and point of sale. These are routine softwares. I would not say they transform the business. They align your business and then they streamline your business, I would say, into good data analytics and all. But I think these peripheral new things that are coming up, that are rapidly changing the way you do business, the way you see trainings, the way you can scale up actually in your business.
Wow, this was brilliant, Doctor. I think the way you have talked about leveraging IT, one, to set in processes, and next, to transform your business. Both the aspects you brought out very, very well. And also the blend of using technology with young minds I think that is something for a lot of businesses to learn from, especially if healthcare kind of an industry as yours, which is so personalized and so customized when it comes to experience with the doctor. If this can be so beautifully, set down as processes and automated to such an extent for scale, then I think most other industries should be able to, leverage it well for their scale up. Yeah, great. This brings us to another important aspect of business when it's going on for several years. When it comes down as a family business, especially, there are various dynamics that run within the family, and also the challenges and the advantages that are both that comes with a family business. So, how have you all approached the whole concept of succession and leadership, taking it from one generation to another, and then the future?
Yeah. So I think me and my brother would represent the second generation after my father started it in 1978. He started with the andrology clinic set up in 1978, established the first sperm bank in the country. Both of us joined him in 2010, 2011, and that's when we started, revamped the whole setup and started doing IVF for the first time. There were a lot of struggles, regarding skill that you would need to succeed in a healthcare, and I'm not saying business, but a healthcare outcome, the way you treat, the medicines that you give and all those things. So there's a lot of struggles in the initial part and nobody is there to teach you. And then you're struggling with the medical part, you're struggling with finance, you're struggling with marketing, you're struggling with HR, and we never used to understand all these, other domains. The entire focus was on, treatment and medical, and, you ignore the other parts. I would say the organizational parts, the financial parts, the operational parts, the strategy part, and all those things. So I think what we've done now, I think TA Asia Pacific, which is a Boston-based private equity firm, they invested in us in April 2019, looking at the setup in Indra IVF and looking at the IVF industry overall in the country, which has a huge scope. And I think after that, we also realized, we need to bring in professional management. So I think one of my biggest achievements in last 1 year, I would say, my personal biggest achievement would be to put in a excellent management team now. So initially, till last year, I would say it was pretty much a family-run business. So you've acquired all those skills and other things, but now we have entirely professionalized the management. So I am the CEO now. There are 8 people reporting into me: chief of marketing, chief of technology, chief of HR, and all these are very seasoned people. All of them come with 2 decades or plus experience in their respective field. And now, after working with them for almost a year, now I realize that, personally, as an entrepreneur or as a family that you have started working and built up a business, you could never reach to that level of excellence that these people can take the company to. As an HR person, if somebody is doing 10 initiatives for the employees, I was not doing even one. I would say I didn't have the knowledge or experience to even do one thing out of those 10 things. As a technology officer, somebody is putting in systems, IT transformation, digital transformation for your company. I could have never done it. As a marketing person, the way you spend your marketing budgets into categories or different zones, I would never be able to do it. So these people are experts in their field, and I think you set the platform ready for them. You've built in a business model. You've taken it to a certain height or certain scales. You should start plugging in these experts into your business. I'm not saying to do it overnight or to do it in a year. You understand your business better. You say your business runs by operational efficiency. You should bring in an operational officer who can take care of your plant or your machinery or your production or your manufacturing. You think your business runs on marketing, plug in a marketing person. You think your business runs on something else or HR, plug in one person. And as you grow in your business, start plugging in these specialist people. So at one point of time, you would feel you've set the stage right. And now these are the people that would take your company to the next level. I achieved what I wanted to achieve in 10 years. Now there's a cap to it because of my knowledge. I mean, I can't go beyond this because I don't have that requisite knowledge or expertise to, start excelling in every field of the company. And these people are the ones who are experts in their field, and they would definitely take your company to the next level. So I think that's what I have done personally. I would say my biggest achievement last year was to professionalize the company, to bring in these experts and make sure you have an environment where everybody is given importance, everybody gels along well, people respect each other, and they are given enough freedom. I mean, that is one of the biggest mistake that people or entrepreneurs would still do, that you bring in a person, but for every penny of a expense, they'll have to come back to you. So that suffocates them. You have to draw a line that, okay, 10 rupees, don't come to me. If it's 15 rupees, come to me. Something has to be drawn up where they get to work, they get their freedom. And, at the end of the day, you've done your best in last 10 years or 5 years or 15 years. You've reached to that level of EBITDA of 5%, 10%, 30%, 40%. Let them work. I mean, obviously, nobody's here to burn your money. And if they can achieve the same EBITDA, you should be satisfied that they're, managing the company in that bar, I would say. And then help them to take informed decisions, mentor them as to what you would have done in this situation if that comes into you, and help them grow as an individual and help them take informed decisions. Leave it to them. I am sure they'll come take your company to the next level for sure. So I think that's my philosophy. And I mean, this year the task is make sure everybody works in a constructive way. And obviously there could be some personal differences. Everybody's come from a different background, different company, different culture. But how do you gel them all in the culture of your company, making sure your vision, mission, values are being adhered to? How do you develop that culture into all of them is the biggest transformation, I would say, after after mastering the IVF and other things. The biggest achievement would come once all these people start performing as per your business vision.
So true, because this is such an important aspect of bringing in the right talent at the right time in business. And as you rightly said, the initial years you will have to do all that juggle. You may not be able to do all of it, but as you grow the right time, you're now bringing them in and then handing over the mantle to them to do 10x actually of what you've been doing possibly. Yes, it's a transition, like you said, it's definitely a transition over time, but very, very important for enterprises as they scale up. So true. You again spoke about an important aspect, which is keeping the people together. As these leaderships are getting built, it's very important to keep them together as leadership, and also the people below who are used to you, who are used to interacting with the family for very, very long.
Yes.
And given a tough time that we've had in the last 1 year, with the pandemic coming in and making life difficult for most businesses, how would you advise enterprises to keep their human resources motivated in these tough times, and whether it's in growth or slowdown, and the similar crisis could come in the future as well. So how do you suggest enterprises should keep the people together motivated?
I think that's a very important point. There are people who have been working with us for 7-8 years now, and I think they have that affinity that we know the bosses, so they would always try to cut through those lines of reporting and directly would come to you. So again and again, I think it's your duty as an entrepreneur or as a family business or different verticals that you're handling, that you make sure that you constantly pass this message, boss. These are the people who would be heading you. These are the people who are running the company, and everybody has to go by the standards and the SOPs and the policies that they are drawing up. But I think equally important is now I see, there's an initial dissatisfaction when you step back and these new HR people or new CHRO comes in, and then people are not so conversant with them. People can't just pick up the phone and call them as they used to do with you, or WhatsApp you, I'm having this problem, how do I deal with it? So they might not be so approachable, but the kind of initiatives that they roll out. So, there was no formal, kind of a induction or e-induction, I would say, when we used to handle. Now there's a formal e-induction program. everything is on a mobile app now. People can log in their attendance, their leaves, their on duty activities. So they've rolled out a beautiful HRMS software. So I think that's making life easy for people. They can log in their leaves and other details. They can see their salary breakup and everything on their mobile now. There they've started a growth and talent initiative. So where every year they will nominate 50 or 100 people who have shown exceptional work, and there would be certain growth initiatives that are being taken. So they'll be educated into certain programs, into leadership, into effective managerial skills, and company would spend on them for every person some few thousand. I mean, that's not a material amount, but then the employee feels that company is doing something for their growth and for their talent, improvement. So we are doing this program called Gati, which is growth and talent improvement for few people that have shown exceptional growth. We are doing something called as Sampark Se Samadhan. So earlier people used to reach out through emails, phone number. They always had a complaint that 10 बार फोन करते हैं, एक बार भी रिप्लाई नहीं आता है, ये नहीं आता है. Now we've started these initiatives where you can don't call, don't WhatsApp. There's a video call directly, and there's a team sitting separately to address to all your queries. So you can directly dial in for any problems, whether it's attendance or leaves or salaries or anything, payroll, any problem, you can reach out to them. We've started a specially dedicated COVID helpline also in these times. So there's a team of 5-6 people. If you have COVID or any of your family members have COVID anywhere in the country, we would make sure that we would arrange medicines. We would try and arrange a hospital bed. We would try and arrange an oxygen concentrator or an oxygen cylinder or something for the family, entire family. I mean, not just for the employees, it's for the entire family. And we are helping them with the vaccinations also, although government prioritized healthcare vaccinations, but there were some people who were left out. So, we are still going ahead and prioritizing if somebody from you or your family needs vaccination, because it's equally important when we start our operations, in a healthcare, and patients are trusting and coming to you. All your staff at least should be vaccinated. You should follow all the protocols of cleaning, sanitization, mask, social distancing, thermal checks. So, the HR department has gone one step ahead in terms of all the IT initiatives that is making their life simple, so they can punch in their data and everything from their home, or we've given this shift options, where people are called for alternate days in a week or 1 week at a time, and then you get to, because it's very important to take care of your people during these times. And there's a famous saying, and I strongly believe, you take care of the people and people will take care of your company. And because it's not you alone, I very well understand now that I alone cannot do so much. There's a capacity and nobody can do so much until unless you have that workforce who's ready and to work for you, who believes in you, who believes in your mission, and you take ample care of them. And it's very small initiatives that would not cost the company too much. There's a reward and recognition scheme. So there are almost 1,200 awards that we are planning to say. These could be just a recognition on all the platforms, on your desktop, on your mobile app, that comes that this is the employee of the month, or these are the people who have done exceptionally well. There could be few monetary awards. The amount is not much, but then the enthusiasm, the energy that you feel after these awards in these people, and other people also who have not got the awards would try and aspire to get the award next month. That is very important. We've started some engagement programs. So, every center is given a budget to celebrate 5 functions in a year. So you go out with your entire team to a restaurant or a hotel or anywhere, and you just have dinner together. So that increases the bonding at that local center within the team members. So, I think all these initiatives from HR I could have never done, and which is very important in this COVID time. That you have a dedicated helpline, you have engagement programs, you have reward and recognition, you have growth and talent initiatives where you're helping them grow and build up managerial skill into these people, and there's somebody who's ready to listen to them every time they want to speak to. I think that completes the overall care that a company should take of their employees, and it's very important.
Very, very true, and very nice initiatives you spoke about. considering the number of employees that you have, it's quite a big number, large number. And given that they are at the centers, which is a little away from where you are, I think all this will keep them together and motivated beyond the crisis as well.
Yeah.
Nice. Coming back to the crisis and talking about this a little more, the COVID wave 1 and wave 2 have done a lot of damage to several small businesses across various industries. So, in terms of some ideas and some recommendations from you, what's your advice to SMEs in growing out of this COVID crisis?
I think one, we should all utilize this time, which is, you're relatively free from the daily operational hustles, because, all businesses have suffered, whether it's hospitality or healthcare or FMCG. I mean, a few businesses might have done well, but majority of the businesses have suffered. And then you don't have this operational hustle. I personally utilized it to re-strategize and rethink of the business strategy. Obviously, your foundation has to be strong. That brings in the resilience that the organization would want. And obviously, I talked about the if possible, keep a separate fund for these kind of situations where you can tide away with the difficult times. And then COVID is not gonna be here for long. It can come in few waves, and it can impact next 2 or 3 years in few quarters every year. But it can't be till eternity, and businesses would bounce back good. And everybody might have seen, I think Jan, Feb, March was an excellent quarter for most of the businesses. Our GST collections were ever-time high. So I think most businesses had recovered from that initial hit. So I think one is, re-strategize or adapt to the current situation. If you have like e-commerce kind of an options or digital initiatives that you could take, and especially I noticed a lot of change. 70 to 80% of our patients used to come through different marketing methods in 2019, I would say, or 2018. And now I see 75% of our patients coming in from the digital sources. So that is because, digital uptake has suddenly increased. People were not reading the newspapers and other traditional media initially last year because of the fear of COVID, and everything has gone down. And now, thanks to other telecom operators and these data packs, India has the highest number of Facebook users, and you would be surprised. I think we get the data. Because of the usage and all. UP, Bihar are one of the highest, states where you could see Facebook users or different people. As opposed to you're thinking that it would be more in Bombay or Delhi or the metros, I think everybody uses mobile now. Everybody has Facebook and WhatsApp and other means where you can reach out to them. So I think re-strategizing, adapting to the current customer needs as to how you can reach out to your customers, how you can service them in an effective way so that you give that experience to them, and how you can continuously keep engaging with them, on whether it's through call center, whether it's through personal interactions, whether it's through digital medium. I think that is very important to think now, especially when COVID is there and every year you see 1 quarter or 2 quarters being washed out because of COVID. You need to realign your strategy and find out ways how to reach to the customer, and also think about your business models. I strongly believe, innovation is the key. In spite of being in the healthcare sector where, there could be not major innovations or major changes in the technology or major changes in the way you do a surgery. But looking at the Nokia BlackBerry experiences, I think, constant innovation is required. You have to keep coming up with new ideas. Otherwise, your competition would scale up over you. Mm-hmm. And I see, that happening. We were taking a lot of awareness camps back in 2014, 15. Everybody started doing it. Now you don't see that response when you do a patient awareness camp. At time 100 people would turn up. Now even 5 people would not turn up. So there's a constant need. It could have been good in 2014, 15, but now, is the time for webinars. How I can reach out to 1,000 couples at a time. Instead of going to one city, renting out a banquet hall, or calling 50 couples for counseling. How do I reach out to 1,000 couples at a time? How do I do a webinar? People are conversant with Zoom. People are conversant with other video platforms. Everybody has that. So why not do a counseling session on Zoom or any other platform for that matter, and reach out to 1,000 people, and make sure they are engaged with you, make sure they reach out to you, make sure they reach out to your call center counseling team, and be in touch. I mean, I don't want that patient to straight away come to me. I just want to be their knowledge partner or their education partner. And whenever they feel the need that they want to get some treatment done, Indra IVF could be number 1 or number 2 or number 3 in their list of going to a clinic and seeking advice for them. So I think that's where you need to rethink about your business and make sure that you keep your customers engaged and rethink about the strategies that you have.
Absolutely. So true when it comes to dealing with some unprecedented situation like this that businesses have never seen before, and bailing their way through for the last 1 year around this. People have come up with multiple ideas and they're juggling themselves with different options and solutions. So I'm sure all your advice will go very, very handy in structuring their thought process out of this crisis. You had earlier touched upon business resilience through building a kitty, etc. So would you be comfortable if I replace that question with another one? So one of the things that will be interesting for MSMEs to understand from you is, with such a big operation that you're running, most of your time must be getting consumed by business, which typically happens for entrepreneurs. They're constantly occupied with business, either physically or even mentally, even if they're at home. So how do you, balance work life? How do you manage to take out time for yourself and do, pursue some of your areas of passion and spend time with family and, other things that business tends to consume so much of an entrepreneur?
I think, correctly phrased. You end up getting consumed into your business till you are an entrepreneur. But I think having that second line of management that I talked about gives you a lot of leverage in terms of handling the day-to-day operations. And it would take 6 months or a year to, mentor them, tell them about the organization, the vision, the culture, the values, and how to take decisions in the favor of the company and all the stakeholders. And by stakeholders, I would mean my patients or customers in different organizations, and my work task force, the people that are there in the organization who are working for the company. I think if the day-to-day, if you build a very strong management team, coach them into the culture, the values of the company, they start taking up the day-to-day operations from you. And where your guidance is needed is only on the strategic part. I think, and that's where your company needs you. I think and I like it personally. My company now does not need me 10 hours a day. It basically needs me to run maybe 1 hour a day, but for 10 years, rather than getting consumed 10 hours a day and running for 1 year and 2 years, and you are just burnt out and you are no longer in that mental and physical capacity to work for the company. I think as an entrepreneur, you need to step back and think about the broader perspective of not getting consumed or burnt out in the day-to-day operational hustles. Obviously, it takes 6 months or 1 year to coach the people and make sure that they start working as per your wish or as per the company's need. But then you need to strategize on a bigger perspective of how do I grow the business, how do I scale up the business, what is next after this. You've reached to 94 centers. You might reach 250 centers. Your company doesn't need your vision to reach 250. Now it's a brick and mortar kind of a setup, and then building blocks are in place. It's like just opening more stores of a food business or a garment business that you can put up across the country. Training is set up, doctors would come, they'll get trained, they'll go back to their location, they'll start performing, and everything is set. Now, where you need your expertise or your vision is, how do I go beyond? Can I start a maternity business? So many people are getting pregnant from your IVF part. These people would need delivery also. Can I start up a maternity business? Can I start a mother and child business? A lot of people would have some eventful deliveries, and then babies would need NICU care. Can you go beyond maternity and child business into some kind of FMCG business? People spend a lot on their child, so garments and toys and all those things. So I think that's the bigger perspective, that you need to step back and also focus on your physical and mental health, because that's very important. You've been, consumed in the business for last few years, day and night, from morning till night. There's no family life, nothing. So step back a little bit, focus on your physical and mental health. And I feel whenever you are free the most, it's that time when you get most amazing ideas in business. If you're consumed the whole day, you'll never get ideas to expand. And also we're thinking now, I mean, on the accessibility part, we're thinking, we already have a hub and spoke model. So I mean, I I remember this initially when we used to open clinics, it was just the hubs and the main clinics and the bigger setup with all the OT and everything and there. And then 2 days we went out on a holiday, and this spoke model came to our mind because we were free from all the daily hustles and all. And we said, why not to increase the accessibility? Let's start approaching the small villages and towns and smaller cities. Obviously, I would not go with my full setup there, because then the operations and returns and all those become a challenge. Let's go with a smaller setup, and let's see, out of 100% of the treatment, if I can do 70% or 80% there, so people would save time. I mean, instead of a person from, say, Akola traveling to Nagpur or Nanded traveling to Nagpur for 20 days, he or she will just have to travel to Nagpur, say, for 2 days, and rest can be done in Akola or Nanded or any smaller city nearby for that matter. So that would be good. I mean, people get the brand at their doorstep. People don't have to travel, take off from work, don't lose money on one side and paying you on the other side also. So they're losing double the money. And that's why people were doing, IVF at other places in their city. So why not go to their city and just ask them for a day or two? That's it. You come to the main center and we'll do it there. So that model clicked. Now we, out of 94 centers, approximately, 45, 46 are the main hubs, and 45, 46 are the clinics. Now we're thinking to go one level beyond and train the gynecologist in the country. Now there are 30,000 gynecologists. Only 1,500 are doing IVF. Rest are not doing IVF. Rest are doing just general forms of infertility treatment. And then again, there is a knowledge gap and all those things, because infertility is not a big part of the curriculum of your education when you do graduation, post-graduation in Gynac. So we are going ahead and developing capabilities in them. We are training them. We are giving them virtual trainings now because of COVID, so they can't come. So there's a 7-day online program that we've launched, which they can do basis their time convenience. And it's followed by a 2-day hands-on experience in terms of observation in their nearest clinic, wherever they are. Then we are putting up, equipment from our side into their labs. So we are developing an IUI lab. We are developing a small fertility setup where they can do basic investigations and, basic things. So I think these ideas would come when you're free, when you step back and, instead of 10 hours, you just work for 2 hours and make sure that how do I push my work to somebody in the company so that you are relatively free and you can start thinking about the bigger objectives. How do I position my company into a world-class organization? How do I build up resilience? How do I increase the barrier to entry? How do I increase the quality of care that we do? I mean, we would be the first IVF chain in the country who's gone ahead and looked for accreditation. So, NABH is one kind of an accreditation for general hospitals. So we've done QAI, which is Quality Accreditation Institute of India accreditation, which they do exclusively for an IVF center. So they have parameters for an IVF center. Because if I go for NABH or other things, they are generalized for a hospital. They might not have so many parameters to look for in an IVF center, especially. So we've gone ahead, 17 or 18 of our centers are already accredited. The rest 25 are underway of accreditation, which we would complete next year. So we are constantly looking at, factors that would bring in resilience, which would increase the quality of care, which would give that wow experience to the patient, and which would increase the barriers to entry. I mean, you obviously, when you're scaling up, you want to build a business model that's not easily breakable. Somebody should not come in with tons of money tomorrow and suddenly disrupt your business overnight. That should not happen. Like happened in telecom and other industries, suddenly somebody comes in and wraps up your business. So I think that's very important from a sustainability point of view. And then I strongly believe that, finances, money or generating revenues are a byproduct. You keep doing the right things at the right time, And if your business model is good, money is a byproduct of what you do. You keep making your customers happy, money would automatically come. Don't count on the success. I mean, and it's a very important thing. I keep telling my team, don't count success of a new center by operational or financial break even. Count success when you first do your first successful IVF. You've done your first successful IVF or first 10 successful IVF. You count that center as operational break even. I mean, that's it. I mean, financial break even will come because I know, I mean, the model is such that if you keep doing the right things, if you keep giving good service, good patient treatment outcomes, patients are bound to come. People will come with word of mouth. That's not a problem. So I think placing the organization values and other things and patients first as a service industry, you keep focusing on these issues and rest things will fall in place. So I think these are the bigger perspective that you should realign yourself and start thinking during this time as an entrepreneur, as a promoter, as a co-founder. Your job is to focus on these things and make sure that you keep make your team doing the right things in these times, and be it financial, be it balancing your short-term long-term goals. Because of COVID, everybody had to readapt, had to focus on how to cut down the fixed cost and how to keep the business alive, whether it's on operational side, whether it's on technology side, that you keep bringing in these new technology that would help your business, whether it's on the business model, whether it's on the reputational side that you manage quality in your business, and whether it's on your HR organizational side that you keep that connect with your task force. I think all these things are very important, and job of the promoter or the co-founder that you start thinking and start building on all these things as you grow.
Wonderful roundup, Dr. Muridia. That was excellent, covering almost all aspects of business with you over the last set of questions. Thank you very much, Dr. Muridia. I think we've got an excellent coverage from you in terms of what people should do with their business from all perspectives of the business.